Welcome to Season 10 of CX in the Wild. 10 seasons of conversations with the visionaries who are reshaping the world, one experience at a time. This season, we go further into the minds of those who challenge the status quo and reimagine what's possible. And now, the adventure continues.
All right, welcome back to CX in the Wild. This time we are in Miami. We just finished up the IQPC CX Exchange. I actually flew all the way back from Dubai to do this show. And in the process, I'm also here with Birdie AI, a partner that I'm following their story because I believe that they have a solution that's going to be a little bit newer take on customer experience. And in that process, I went to dinner with Camila. And in that discussion, we started talking about the various levels of expertise in CX. And I was just, I was kind of surprised at your hot take on CX. And so we decided to have more of a conversation. And then I was like, we better podcast this. So here we are. Can you tell the audience who you are and what's keeping you busy these days?
Of course. So thank you very much for having me in this conversation, in this podcast. And hi to everybody. My name is Camila Ferreira. I also go for Cami. I have more than 20 years of experience leading companies in Latin America, in Europe, and also in the US. And more recently, I founded my own company called Rise Up, where I consult for client experience with a focus on transforming client experience into revenue.
Yeah. That's what really caught my ear was the transformation into revenue. Now, certainly there were a bunch of buzzwords in there. And being a consultant, I was sharing with you before the podcast started, it's, for me as an an executive who's left the corporate world, I think when we leave the corporate world, there really is no other option to keep working than to share our experiences as a consultant. But then there's like all this negative, like it's almost like, for me, I like say embarrassed to be a consultant or that sort of thing. But our perspective outside of the organizations gives us an edge at seeing what drives revenue.
Absolutely.
We are not beholden to these internal politics. We can tell the truth if we want. And even that perspective, for me, I don't see a lot of consultants actually delivering value. You know, I was in Dubai and on a consulting pitch, and they said, so you're going to give us this strategy and you're going to tell us what our problem is. And they said, do you then do the work or do you just give us a slide deck? And I was like, well, I do the work. And they're like, okay, we're in, because they don't want to work with consultants who don't know how to do it. What are you experiencing? So you started a couple of months ago, 2.5 months?
No, it's actually last month. It's brand new. I transitioned out of corporate last December.
Wow.
It's brand new.
How lucky are you to like come out of the gate and be on this podcast? You like hit the ground running.
I love customer experience. That's what I have been doing for the past 15 years because the first 10 years of my professional life, I was in finance. And I think this combination is so powerful.
No wonder. Yeah.
Right? Because you truly understand what matters for shareholders, for the C-level. And then as a CX leader, what I do is to translate or to close the bridges, build the bridges actually between finance, the goals that we need to deliver in an organization, and the power of CX.
Yes. But the finance piece of it, that explains so much to me why you're focused on that. I often try to explain this idea of indirect value and direct value. Direct value is it affects the P&L. Indirect value is teamwork, alignment, synergy, all the buzzwords, transformation. But understanding how it affects the actual financial situation of a company is crucial.
And I wish that every single CX leader had a background in finance, because it would make their lives so much easier. One of the main frustrations I hear from people that I mentor and people that I met throughout my career is that they don't have a seat at the table at the C-level, right? And why? Most of the times they are speaking CX metrics, CX language, which is needed among CX teams. But if you really want to carve out your space at the boardroom, then you got to talk finance. You got to talk impact. You got to talk business growth and how to connect this to your operations.
I'm going to just pause a little bit there. I'm not going to mansplain. All I can say is that is exactly right. When I go into an organization myself, people often wonder, why do I get the attention of the executives? And it's exactly for what you said is, I don't talk about KPIs. I want to know what the revenue problem is.
Exactly.
And I want to know, when is the revenue problem? Is it in December or is it in June? And once you begin talking to the executives at that level, they then can figure out what you do. Okay, so you're asking me questions about when my revenue problem is. I tell you it's in June. You tell me about the customer. Now I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me give you a kind of a personal example.
Do it.
Right? And then I'm going to give a professional example. So I am from Brazil. I live here in the US. If I know many people who live in the US and do not speak English. Can they live here? For sure. They have been living here, but their scope is very much limited. By the time you start speaking the same language of the country that you live, then many more doors will open for you, right?
Yes.
Let's translate this to CX. If you only speak CX language, your scope is going to be limited to CX. If you speak different languages, and let me say, sales, marketing, product, HR, then the sky's the limit. Because you're going to go to your stakeholders and you're going to put yourselves on their shoes, understand their problems, and connect how to solve their problems through CX. Instead of having to knock the door will always be open for you.
You're 100% right. And I wonder, how did you get to this perspective? So I'll tell you, I often don't have this angle of the conversation, but I'll tell you how I got to where we have a common conversation is. I really started, I think, trying to understand. Maybe it started with user experience, and somehow over the path, I got involved with service design and just-in-time manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And I understood that there was a financial component, but this was early days for me in the CX world. Back then, I was more about advertising and marketing. Mm-hmm. And I started trying to just figure out how to connect service design and advertising and marketing to financials. And it wasn't very easy because I didn't have a lot of training or education in this area. But then I talked to our CFO, who was this really nice guy. And he just spoke only numbers. He didn't understand CX, UX, whatever. He looked at the balance sheet, the P&L, and I said to him, I said, can we talk? So we would go to lunch and talk, and I would explain the journey and the service design and the UX. And then he said, you know what it sounds like you're doing is you're applying GAAP accounting principles to manufacturing. Oh. And he said, if you applied GAAP accounting principles to content, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I was like, what? Can you do that? And he was like, yes. And so we spent probably 6 months just going over these ideas. And that's where, for me, the part of CX where I began to get real traction was there's just-in-time manufacturing. People know that. But just-in-time content can be paired with that. And that's how I sort of put the lens of accounting around it, that, to your point, once I started to speak a little bit of accounting, wow, I was like, all these doors, they just flung right open.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in my case, it ties back to my early years in finance, because I worked for accounting, I worked for planning, I worked for different financial departments. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, what I used to see was numbers and initiatives not necessarily related or interconnected. One thing is what we're going to report to finance. The other thing is what we're going to do in the market. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, no, those things should be intertwined. They should talk to each other, right? And once I transitioned out of finance, because deep inside I felt something was missing. I was like, okay, I know how to handle, I know how to communicate with my audience, but I want to make an impact. That's what I want to do. And to me, the concept that I have of CX today is that not part of the business. CX is the business. Yeah. And why? Because it connects absolutely everything. Especially if we think that the customer experience, the customer is absolutely every person that you engage with. You are my customer now, and I am your customer right now.
Yeah.
Right? So, and we can be here just kind of chatting or actually exchanging ideas on how to improve the experience and be more successful. That's how we got connected.
Yes. On that note, I often try to explain to people that customer experience is the operating system for the global economy. Before, we had different methods, but customer experience creates a matrix out of everything it touches, and it's this matrix that allows you to what you said, connect advertising to supply chain, connect finance to the call, to a smile on a phone call. And you're talking about every person is a customer, and every employee is a customer, and every politician is a customer, and every church, school, and every human being is a customer now. And that's why it's the global economy. And the matrix of thinking that applies to each of these humans and their behaviors, it really is, CX, I think, is a more brute force way to say behavioral economics. And behavioral economics, we've found particularly in the internet, whether it's interests on driving a business model like TikTok, or it's viral content, all of these things, the human behavior tied to the financial indicators in a region or in a business or in a department, an initiative.
Yeah. One thing that I always say is, when you go to talk to companies, right? When you go consult, most of the companies nowadays, they do have some sort of survey, CSAT or NPS or something like that. But then I ask, what kind of a survey that you have for your employees? And some of them, they do have it. Then the second question is, how often do you survey your employees? Because the mindset, whenever it's in place, is, I need to survey my customers, which is true. But who is your customer? Start from within. Start with your employee. And in my last employer, that's exactly what we did. We started all of the transformation from within. Surveying the employees, bringing them to the decision making. I say they are the real frontliners. And from there, and we can see, I do have a correlation analysis that proved employee satisfaction correlates positively with merchant satisfaction, with client satisfaction. But if we just ask teams and employees to deliver something they don't have, it's going to be way more challenging.
You spoke about a lot of things there. I'll tell you that maybe you have this experience because of your background in Brazil, but working in Africa, it's very interesting to provide customer service. So let's say a restaurant wants to hire local people to work in the restaurant, and they want to provide service. It's interesting how many people they hire have never gone to a restaurant or ever had service. So teaching someone to deliver something that they haven't experienced is challenging. And so tapping into that conversation, as you mentioned, I think is very important. I have a friend, Deba Saho. He's vice president of transformation at a major company. And he was onto the same conversation you're having, which is, I asked him, I said, you've been doing this job for a while. Most people in this job don't last a whole long. Like, the mandate of delivering transformation isn't an easy target to hit. How have you survived so long? How do you deliver this? What is your secret? And he said, when people think of transformation, they think about going from point A to point B. And he said, most people focus on the outcomes, point B, and because everyone can imagine what the future looks like and it's easy to iterate and discuss, he said, but transformation happens at point A. And those who focus at point A with the employees or focus at point A in the present, they are the ones who can show the progress to the end goal.
Absolutely. When I was listening to you, it reminded me, I've had the chance and the challenge and the privilege of leading operations of a big multinational delivery company during the pandemic. So imagine everybody was locked at home. The company was growing 3 digits on a monthly basis, but we were all working from our houses, right? So I haven't had a chance to meet the team in person, but at the same time with the challenge of delivering or in leading that operation. And customers were flooding in, everything was working fine. So how do you transform in that scenario? That's exactly kind of listening to you that made me think about it. And I leverage data. And this is a great thing for us to share with the audience. Data nowadays is in our favor. However, knowing how to manage data is what makes a huge difference. So in that scenario, what we did was we created the very first external diversity program for that company, where we promoted women-led restaurants on the platform because they used to have higher satisfaction rates. Look at this. This is how we combine customer experience. We reviewed the data. We identified that those restaurants were above average. And then we create a specific campaign to promote them. Because we did it, it went viral. So other women-led restaurants came after us instead of us having to go after those restaurants, right? And we expanded. We also included the final consumers, saying, what is your preference? Data. Increasing revenue just by being more niched, by leveraging data. So yes, it's possible to keep transforming, but I completely agree with you. We got to focus on point A. What are their pains? How can we serve them? Right? So if we really want to improve client experience, customer experience, it starts from point A.
That's right. When you were just talking there about, sometimes I get a little frustrated because I cover these topics so much on my podcast, and what you said was just pure insight and gold for an audience if they heard it and understood it. And it sounds so much like so many of these other talk tracks I hear, but you have this nuance and the data creating the niche for performance. I hear that all the time, but it is true. If you can find the sharp point, the area of focus that is aligned to the revenue opportunity, you can make direct value. But so many people don't know. They have all the data. They have it all.
We live in a world that we have too many data, too many pieces of data, and it's easy to get lost. Again, how do you get focused, right? So first of all, what is the goal? What is the goal for that particular company that you are working for? What are the main struggles the main obstacles they are currently facing to get there?
I'm not trying to cut you off, but I want to stop there because it gets back to what is at the crux of what I'm always trying to do is give people real actionable value. Mm-hmm. When we say, what is the problem of the company? If it's not related to the finances, if you're not there, the problem is not that Betty from this department is causing problems, and it's not that these customers stopped buying. Mm-hmm. It's the revenue has a mind, the finances have a mind of their own.
Absolutely.
You have to, the problem is something to do with the dollars.
Yeah. But think in this particular example, right? So revenue was not a big issue because the company was growing. We were in the middle of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. But being profitable was the biggest challenge. And this particular initiative that expanded beyond restaurants, we included the eaters and also the couriers, improved margin by 3 percentage points.
See?
That's the thing. So what is the challenge the organization that you are working for? Because if I had a targeted revenue, most likely I would have been less successful. Why? Revenue was growing by itself. That was not there that the conversations of the C-level were happening. It was profitability. Okay, so how can I be more profitable? Let me see through the data. And again, being a CX leader, what are the restaurants, what are the suppliers that offer the best experience? Because I know it drives loyalty. And loyalty drives recurrency, right? The other thing that we observed is, as an eater, as a women eater, you crave dessert. And in a delivery company, as you know, peak hours are breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What about in between? So we created specific campaigns to push the adoption or the consumption of dessert between peak hours. And last but not least, we also brought in the couriers. So I partner with NGOs across Latin America to help women in need, financial dependency, I would say, to become couriers and conquer their financial independence. It was an ecosystem that's translated into profitability.
You know, we were just talking about the global operating system. It's all an ecosystem now. That's exactly right. Yeah. Everything we do, if you don't think about it as an ecosystem, then your exposure to external forces and disassociation from progress is pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get distracted.
Oh my goodness. And the main problem I see is departments working in silos, right? Oh, I win at the expense of you losing. No. And that's why CX is the business and not part of the business, right? So if you have marketing delivering their goals, does it mean the company is successful? No. If you have sales kind of delivering the goals, does it mean the company is successful? No. But if you have marketing, product, sales, operations in sync, then this company is successful. And this to me is the power of CX, is connecting them, because at the end of the day, there is absolutely no company without a client, without a customer.
Yeah, it's almost interesting how we get, as organizations, we actually sort of lose the sight of everyone in the organization working to the betterment of our clients. It's an interesting, we could probably do a whole research paper on that. I was talking to Pat yesterday about teams, and we were discussing, I see a lot in business. There are people who are in the business of making businesses. And then there are people who are in the business of doing the business. And what I mean by that is, I see a lot of times in startups, they get a first round of funding and then some of the people they hire want to come in and implement HR systems and implement CRM systems and implement, as if their whole goal is to build a machine. But all of those people are all about just doing that work of building the machine. And they're already companies that are born like that and that achieve any success are already disassociating themselves from the other half, or the silos that worry about what the customer wants, worries about the price, worries about the placement, all these things. And so, I think about my own company. Everyone is dedicated to the success of the customer, but to your point, we view everyone in the organization as a customer to ourselves. If someone calls me up and says, "Hey, Dennis, do you have this?" I'm like, this is mine. The customer's call. I have to get this file or get this piece of work done. And that is, everyone in the organization thinks about serving someone else, helping someone else. That's like, at the end of the day, our whole team, their only job is to help whoever asks them.
Yeah. Think of the following. If marketing performance or results is not a sales business, there is no way these companies focus on customer, because it's not part of the culture, right? Oh, my performance is my business, but your performance is yours. No.
Yeah.
And then they complain and say, "Oh, but I don't know why in customer support they are not solving the problem, because they are behaving in the same way as you are." Think that this is not their problem and throwing this to someone else. So it's all about kind of creating this culture. And I see that, to me, customer experience, you got to live and breathe, and it cannot be limited to your professional organizational environment. It's from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, if not including when you are sleeping.
It's true. As I've gone around the world, I've realized that it's my podcast. I can say whatever I want. I've realized I hear these stories. Of course, I wasn't there where the Neanderthal and as human species evolved, but I definitely see archetypes around the world that are very new and different than prior thinkers. And whether you want to call them CXers or behavioral economics born natives or digital natives, I don't know what it is, but there are people who are just either have become oriented mentally around a sharing economy or an ecosystem economy. They no longer are trying to control the finances as much as they are trying to nurture the finances, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. So sometimes we get too deep into something and we forgot to look around the surroundings, the landscape.
Yeah.
Right? Which is your client.
Yeah.
So again, there is no company without a client.
I guess I would also say customers who stick with businesses that don't understand this new global ecosystem, they're going to suffer as well. Adoption of a better customer company ecosystem, it's happening, but it really doesn't happen for everyone. It doesn't happen everywhere in the world as fast either, As I've been sort of coming to the end of my customer experience journey in the world, I just wonder, where will the success at scale come from? Because I see a lot of points of reference all over the world, but it really hasn't become a major movement. The only place that I can think of that has delivered this at any level of magnitude is Dubai. They have a multicultural ecosystem approach to integrating every aspect of life.
Wow.
And have you been?
No, never been to Dubai.
Okay.
But I should definitely go.
Here's the thing. As a CX person, you have, it's like going to the source of the knowledge or the source of the idea. Dubai has a happiness metric, a KPI from the government that all the businesses are aware of and must adhere to.
Wow.
So think about that. They have a customer experience metric. When you go to Dubai, there's no trash. There's no none of these like side effects or weird things that you see as a consumer. Now, certainly, whether you want to talk about other ideologies, they're all over the place. So just focusing on customer experience, you would be very hard pressed to have a negative customer experience in Dubai from anything. So let me tell you this. The customer experience, integration, and culture is so mature there. When an event happens and people are going to that event coming in from out of town, you don't have to tell the airports, to tell the taxis, to tell the hotels, you don't have to tell them that they all are part of an ecosystem and that the goal is to have happy experiences. You don't have to tell anyone. It's seamless. From the time you get to the airport, when you go through control at different borders, you're used to that process.
Yeah.
That's not how it goes down in Dubai. You walk straight through. Like you get off and you walk through, they facial recognition, they just go.
Wow.
So far, when I went through the first time, I thought maybe I had done something wrong because they were like, go. And I'm like, just, and they were like, go. And I'm like, okay. Because they care about the personalized individual part of the ecosystem and they radiate it out. When you get to the upper levels, most of their leaders will tell you that people don't want to live in an echo chamber. There's this woman, I always quote her, Nadia Verji. She is part of the team at Expo City Dubai. They delivered figuratively and literally the most incredible, outstanding customer experience on earth. Expo City Dubai was over 140 countries all coming together to deliver over 130 million visitors and during a 6-month time period.
Wow.
And build a city in the midst of that. And that city was they architected the buildings to take advantage of the natural landscape and the wind and the sun so that visitors could have an experience in the space. They made it sustainable. But I have quoted her. She's saying people don't want to live in an echo chamber. Innovators don't want to just talk to innovators. Universities don't want to talk to just universities. Businesses don't want to talk to just businesses. In Dubai, they have an ecosystem of finance, learning, government, service.
But you see, it comes from the government and it creates a ripple effect of a culture, right? So if we bring this to organizations, it must come from the top. Having someone trying to push this up, is this possible? Of course it is. Nothing is impossible. But if you have an organization that actually has a culture of experience, so like in Dubai, what you were describing, it will permeate.
We talked about this the other night. I firmly believe that the government of your country has everything to do with your success in customer experience. In Dubai, as an example, they have continuity of government. What this means is the learning of the leadership, it continues to evolve, right? Whereas when you have governments where they take the learning over a certain amount of years and reboot it, that rebooting process,
it's so complicated.
It's very complicated. And when you do have a government that has more control through the system and they have the maturity of looking at their people and their businesses as an ecosystem, that where one hand actually has to do with the other. You see customer experience thrive, where in other cultures where you have fear, uncertainty, doubt, power, control, it's a different thing, but
Wow. You just made me think I need to go to Dubai and get to know this in person.
You really should. It is absolutely eye-opening.
I bet. No, what you just described, I was like, wow, jaw dropping here.
So, all right. So let's bring it back to the United States.
Yeah.
One of the other reasons I wanted to talk to you today and explore is I've been sort of letting people know I'm going to, over the next couple of years, change my focus. And I'm really, I think, looking for collaborators who I think are genuine and knowledgeable about CX to deliver direct value. And so you're one of several, and I'm interested in trying to figure out how I can take my momentum and my network and share it with people like you who are building consultancies, or better put, I think, in a position to help businesses who want help to quickly catch up with the global economy. And I don't think everyone's ready to do that.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I think will help you on your journey is the fact that international CX standards are coming. And well, they're already here, but they're just not here in the US. But when you talk about that common language, that's what we're talking about right there. A framework that someone in Brazil and someone in Dubai and someone in Miami can move the learnings and the progress forward.
Yeah.
And I also think what it does is it creates bridges where people are not stationary. People move from Germany to Japan, or if they have standards and we're in they're CXers, it provides a sort of a network of opportunity for people who are nomadic creatures by nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, speaking the same language makes life a lot easier. For example, coming back to the example that I gave to you about living in the US, even when you travel. So if we speak the other language, if we speak an international language, your trip, your vacation, your business trip is going to be completely different on how you're going to engage with others. So I believe that having a standard on how we do CX, thinking of this ecosystem, thinking of connecting and actually driving business growth is very much needed. And then we can have, as you said, we can have people from Canada to Brazil and Europe and Asia speaking exactly the same language, where we are going to learn is the nuance of every single location, which is very much important as well, right? Because sometimes you do have the standard. And again, the way I do CX here in the US is slightly different than how I do in Brazil. And why? Because of the local culture, right? And the local landscape. However, it's a lot easier if we speak the same language. So I think it's very much needed. And this would be very helpful for not only for CX leaders, but for companies in general, kind of knowing the right steps to take to be more successful in creating this ecosystem. And
it is the ecosystem of global finance. That's what it really is.
Once we think finance, we do have it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So, I've said a lot of things on the podcast, and lately I've been feeling like, wow, I really dominate this podcast. What would you like to talk about? Is there anything? We've booked the studio for a limited amount of time. Is there something that you'd like to talk about or share with the audience, or?
Yeah, I would say this mindset of CX being a tool for business growth. I think at least the forums that I have attended so far, and again, 15 years doing CX, most of the conversations I have been part of were very tactical and not strategic, right? And where I believe the field that made me more successful in my career was being a strategic CX leader. And this is what I would like to explore. So how is your experience engaging with other CX leaders? You have traveled the world many, many times. What is your view on how CX leaders position themselves and what is the opportunity they have to be more successful?
This is why I think that collaborating with you in the real business universe is so important. There are not a lot of strategists who say, many people say they are strategists, but to your point, they are orchestrators of tactics and programs and solutions. Like, I can't think of very many CX strategists off the top of my head, and I have seen a lot of people. You know, I bet you I've seen, as I might have mentioned over dinner, there was a woman at Forrester who had a perspective on how the numbers worked, actually. So she's strategically comparing how the numbers work in the different contexts of humanity versus finance versus, and I think and I want to answer your question because you're really asking an important thing, but let's define what strategy is before we try to answer that question. Strategy in one context is the ability to evaluate a number of different outcomes and determine of the number of outcomes that you analyzed, which one may be the best for a particular reason. And what I find is many CXers, and not at their own fault, but within organizations, you don't have permission to be strategic, and your strategy really amounts to this platform versus that platform. I sat with a woman the other night at the event, and she knew what her problem was, but she decided that her course of action was to pick the right software to fix her problem. And despite my best efforts to try to guide her to some wider thinking, she couldn't. And I think so. To be as clear as I can about answering your question, it's not that the people are not strategists. I think that businesses don't allow for strategists to propagate freely within their organizations. And for that reason, I don't encounter many organizations where strategic leadership is a priority.
I once posted on LinkedIn that you cannot be so good up to overshadow others. So, and that's why I decided to have my own company, because I can be strategic, right? And not be limited by the boundaries of having to choose between one platform or the other. I really want to use CX and all of my experience to help building a better world.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, deeply believe it's possible.
In the Asian cultures, we have a saying, one of the rules is don't outshine the master. And that is a problem with CX in businesses is, it's new and sometimes it gets a lot of attention. But at the end of the day, you're not outshining the master if you both have a revenue target. And,
Absolutely.
It gets back to if you speak the same language. To your point, to sum up this podcast, I think speaking finance and accounting, how would you frame that? So can you, because you have more experience articulating this, how would you describe it to our audience? If they were to tap into this new language, where do they find it in their organization and how do they become part of it?
Yes. I think, in my opinion, everything starts by listening to the customer. And the customer is your employee. Start from there. But empathetically listening. Because sometimes we are in a conversation and people are thinking about something else. They are not truly present. When you ask for a feedback, are you really interested on learning from that feedback and make things differently? That's how you will start speaking the CX language. When you truly connect, when instead of you as a salesperson trying to hit your metrics or your performance of the month, you were truly interested on your client's problem and how to solve it, even at the expense of you not selling.
Yes, but how do we translate that into this financial and accounting language that makes a CXer move closer to the top?
Not sure I'm following you.
So of course, we need to be empathetic. Empathy is a new asset for sure. But if I'm a manager, director, vice president, and I'm in a silo and I want to get out across this silo, or I want to create positive growth for my organization, I can't talk about empathy. I can't talk about...
Oh, I got you.
How do I talk this new language of, like, you're a financial...
Yes. Long-term value, churn prevention, revenue growth. Those are the things that we need to talk about. Right?
What else do we need to talk about? Here's what I talk about. I think just in its simplest form, when I get to these conversations, these strategic conversations, to put a clear statement in the minds of the stakeholders I work with in big brands when I'm consulting, I'm focused on two things: cost to serve, cost to acquire. I'm trying to bring harmony to those, because if they're imbalanced, your company is not healthy. Yes. It's not growing. It might be stationary, stagnant, flat, or surviving. But until you can drive down your cost to serve and take that money and put it into acquiring new customers, you don't have the flywheel of growth. So those are the ways I talk about it, to get away from empathy.
No, I got your point. Totally. Now I understood your question.
Yeah.
And to me, it's kind of a customer lifetime.
Customer lifetime value.
The longer the customer stays, the better. And most likely, if the customer is staying longer, it's because he or she is having a good experience. Experience drives loyalty. Loyalty drives recurrency. Recurrency drives referral. Right? So it's an ecosystem, because you're talking about one customer that is staying longer, but what about the positive impact that this customer has on others? We know it's completely different than a cold call. We receive a call from a company. Then if you have a friend of yours saying, hey, I have experienced this and you should try.
Yeah.
Right? So lifetime value for sure. Then the second one is churn prevention. And what I see, particularly small to medium companies making mistakes, is going after new clients, but not necessarily taking care of the existing ones. And at some point, they are kind of losing customers at the same pace they are acquiring. And why? The focus is very much limited on acquisition. Is this important? For sure. But losing an existing customer is more expensive than acquiring a new one.
Yes. And I think many people will agree with you. Where I would articulate that is, I would say, and this was in my keynote, I wish you would have been there. In the keynote, I talked about part of the job of a customer experience professional is to make it feel like a downgrade to switch or to leave. So churn prevention is about making so much value that to make an alternative choice seems like a bad idea. Like Apple's ecosystem. When you start using all of these Apple products together, and you're like, oh, I don't really want to go to some other platform. It just feels like it's a downgrade. Yes. That's customer experience, churn prevention. Yes. Churn prevention isn't like hitting them with an email when they decide to complain and switch.
No, this is too late.
Yeah.
Because they decided to complain already. Something has already happened. And us living in this world with so much data, we should know. We shouldn't wait until a complaint is raised. Right? So that's why I'm so passionate about AI, because I think AI will help us to be a lot more laser focused and add value to the business. right? So I don't see AI as a threat at all. I see AI as a partner.
Yeah. I don't know who all these people are that are afraid of AI. That's a whole nother discussion. Thank God we didn't talk about AI too much here. All right. So on the horizon for you, you're newly in the market as a consultant. You have multi-continent awareness and visibility to business and customer experience, hence the global ecosystem. Where are you focused now in the next year? What is the ideal scenario? Let's put it out in the universe. Ideal scenario for you. Who comes to talk to you? How do you find them? What are the relationships? What's your strategy?
Yes, absolutely. I'm in my early days. It's a month and a half in, right, in this new position. So I have been very much focused on promoting myself and letting particularly my audience and the kind of a new members I'm bringing to my network know what I'm doing, which is consulting, mentoring, and keynote speaking. And why? For 25 years of my life, they saw me in a different place as an employee. And now it's completely different. And I have also signed some partnership. Birdie is one of them where we help each other because I'm a firm believer that if you can have the cutting edge technology, but if you don't have a strong strategy behind it, you're not going to succeed as much as you could. And for Birdie and other companies like Birdie is also important because if their clients do not get the best value of their solution, most likely the lifetime is going to be shorter than it could be. Right? So it's a win-win. That's exactly what I have been doing. Promoting myself, attending podcasts like yours, attending events, going on stage to inform and let my audience know what I'm doing and how much I can help them. I have been doing this from the company, from the organization standpoint for so many years. I have so many cases to share and inspire audience on changing this mindset, on going after of being a strategic CX leader that drives revenue, that drives business growth, and have a seat at the boardroom.
Awesome. Well, I think you've got all the right things in motion. So it just struck me. So I was there because I'm fascinated with Birdie, and you too.
Yes.
You see what the value is. What is your take on Birdie? I didn't even know you were aligned to them.
Yes, no, I'm a partner of them. And what I love the most is that they translate everything that is kind of around you in terms of customer experience, social media, what is kind of mentioned by the employees or on a CSAT, on an NPS, and they consolidate absolutely everything in a way that you can take action. Because again, speaking of data, everybody has access to data, but what you do with the data is what makes you successful or not, or more successful or less, right? And that's exactly what Birdie does. So they do have such an amazing solution that helps kind of translate, consolidating all of those pieces of information and give you insights of what needs to be improved and what needs to stay, because that's the other thing. Sometimes what people do is in order to fix something, they broke something that is working. And Birdie tells you exactly, as we were saying about strategy of the different kind of avenues that we can take, what is the most likely one to be successful? That's what Birdie does. That's what I like so much.
That's why when I heard it the first time and I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is going to change. It's like going from being a caveman to a Neanderthal. you suddenly, I have spent so many hours with Post-it notes and trying to paper mache my way to a journey that was based on enough input that it made sense. And Birdie just sort of says, oh, give me all the Post-it notes from all the teams in the organization all at once, and I'll tell you.
Yeah. And they have so many kind of amazing real cases to share, right? Not only in Brazil, but also here in the US, that proves the value they drive to the business. And again, sometimes I do think that leaders are afraid of making an investment, but because they do not know what is the concept of ROI.
You know what? I was talking to Birdie the other day. The cost of the platform is it's like nothing compared to the value that an organization would get.
But if you are not a data-driven person, if you do not see value on customer experience, then it's expensive. Right?
Yeah, it's true. And it is going to be lost on some audience people, the power of Birdie, because it's I remember when I was young trying to explain to people that this thing called the internet was going to be important. And people are like, nah. I'm like, okay, not just Birdie, but all of the companies that are doing what they're doing, synthesizing down through this line of sight to the financials, like skipping the whole
manual work.
Yeah, manual work, but also the indirect value. Like they're not trying to provide indirect value. They're saying, take this, see if you can get it into the P&L.
But let's get back to the boardroom, right? As you said, you consult for big companies. You go there. What is your main challenge? Revenue growth. Where is your main challenge? Profitability. What if I tell you what to do precisely to be more successful? That's exactly what Birdie does. It's a no-brainer.
And with that said, that's exactly what you do for organizations. I wish you the best of luck on your journey. After this podcast, I have some ideas about how to collaborate with you in the market. And it's just been a wonderful time having you. Thank you for being on CX in the Wild in Miami, just impromptu.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here, sharing with your audience everything that I love and I'm passionate about.
Thank you for being part of this journey with us. We hope these conversations challenge your thinking and inspire you to explore new paths. There's so much more to discover. Keep listening, dive into more episodes, and let's continue this adventure together.